Dear Diary, it's a new day of me ignoring the impending doom, a new memory to write down. I used to play this game, a game where nobody and none of their mothers even remember the story, where everyone, including me, bashed the level design without as much as a hint of mercy, but none of it really mattered because the gameplay was king. No joke, everything in this game revolved around its combat, which was some of the finest, if not the finest, in its modern genre. And yay, there were also 50 tons of new loot permission to sort through, and you'd spend half your playtime on the inventory screen selling excessive junk, upgrading desirable junk, crafting new junk, but it was okay, because through it all you could say to yourself, hey, it'll be fine, buddy, you'll be back in the middle of combat barely a minute from now. And indeed you were. And you had katanas and bows and arrows, weird input combinations to trigger special powerful moves, all to help you dispose of pesky demons. And everything was so gloriously aggressive and fast-paced and highly mobile, and the controls were so tight and smooth and all around perfect. I used to play this game, but for the love of God, was it Nioh? Or was it Shadow Warrior 2? Okay, now hold on, wait just a minute. Don't play the montage yet. I have to come clean about a couple of things first. First of all, this video exists solely for the noble purpose of talking about Shadow Warrior 2, a game people seem to have forgotten about even before it bloody released. Possibly because it was in the thankless position of coming out mere 5 months after Doom 2016, which in turn is a game people can't seem to shut up about to this day. And after Doom Eternal, which for the record I certainly enjoyed, and Nioh 2, which I recall drooling over in eager anticipation for it to escape exclusivity jail, only to never once even finish it, I came to realize the staggering amount of similarities between Nioh and Shadow Warrior 2, and thus a video idea was hatched. Now brace yourselves for a little tea. Shadow Warrior 2 is by and large the actual ultimate single-player FPS experience of the decade. This would not have come as a surprise if only I were already basking in some quality YouTube fame, and thus by now I'd have made my top 10 games of the decade and y'all would already know. But yes, Shadow Warrior 2 is one of my favorite video games of all time, much like many people have declared Doom Eternal one of theirs. And I'm still heartbroken by how many people overlooked this game, how many people put it down and beat it senseless for flaws they are otherwise beyond happy to ignore in other games. And the scars ain't healing! As for Nioh, well, I love it to bits. It would absolutely also have a spot in my top 10. I've put hundreds upon hundreds of hours into it, but unlike the subject of this video, it got a high-profile, high-quality sequel and is well loved and respected by most of its player base, so who cares? So yeah, I'm here today to talk about Shadow Warrior 2. But before I can do that, I absolutely have to drop at least a few words on what preceded it, it's only polite. Starting with the OG Shadow Warrior released in '97. Did you know this game had a couple of tricks up its sleeve that elevated it above its build peers, like secondary modes of fire or the multitude of drivable vehicles? Regrettably, the demo version of the game included the entire first episode, consisting of the 4, by heaps and bounds, best levels the game had to offer. The rest of the game is hardly of consistent quality, so even though it packed some fantastically bloody, dynamic action, it's not the best remembered first-person shooter ever. And speaking of bloody, there also was Blood, the single most fabulous build shooter ever, and the one that inexplicably never got revived in the modern era. And in a world where we were allowed to have Duke Nukem forever, a game we would have been much better off without, not having a modern Blood game strikes me as a cardinal sin. Oh yeah, there also was Sin, that other old shoe. No, wait, getting a little too derailed here. Here's a lovely fun fact. I once sincerely believed Flying Wild Hog were working on a Blood reboot. Tragically, all those job openings they advertised at the time were either for bloody poo or sun-dried urine. Now that I finally mentioned the developers, let me tell you a little something about their initial Shadow Warrior reboot from 2013. That game came straight out of nowhere, and it had no right whatsoever to be particularly good. But it was. And it was all the things OG Shadow Warrior was, and then some, complete with gloriously gory, relentless action, coupled with the single greatest first-person swordplay I had ever experienced. Until the sequel, gorgeous audio visuals, pitch-perfect prepubescent humor, solid level design, and a shockingly deep storyline about friendship, this game was a positive revelation. And then the sequel came about and dropped a hot steamy deuce on such nonsense as memorable story and good level design, in favor of just improving and fine-tuning the excellent gameplay they had already had in place from before. Real talk, there is much to complain about with this game. I too was hurt and underwhelmed by the fact that after the first couple missions, all you do for the remainder of the game is backtrack across the same 2 or 3 general areas with zero plot motivation, as well as the fact there's just way too much unnecessary loot. And in all honesty, I probably would have enjoyed my playthrough of the game even better if I just ignored half of it. Because a good half of the loot you collect, truthfully, is good for one thing and one thing only: sale. An easy fix would have been to set the drop rates more reasonably, as instead, literally every single enemy you slay, and you slay about as many per mission as my brain cells get slayed by gender politics activism, drops a whole lot of loot. And if that pesky collector within you kicks in and you actually mindfully do collect everything, you make Wang filthy Oprah rage by the midsection of the game, at which point the only law-friendly explanation for him to accept any more missions is because he simply enjoys them and has a good fun. But you know, all this nauseating dirty business you must tend to with all that loot could have been quite easily tolerable if only the inventory wasn't visually and practically so utterly disgusting. I reckon my 2-year-old niece could whip out a more attractive design in Microsoft Paint, to be frank. But once again, I could never with clear conscience claim to be truly bothered by any of this, because the raw gameplay here, that is, the gunplay, the kinesthetics of it all, the control system, and all the supporting mechanisms, all combined simply makes for some of the most faultless, flawlessly uninterrupted fun I ever had with a video game. I mean, those Polish maniacs even managed to improve the melee that was already rock hard solid in the previous game, and as a bonus they even managed to create the single most brilliant chainsaw there ever was in a video game, bar none. I didn't really mind running circles around the same 3 or 4 general areas, because on each revisit I was having an absolute blast. And the loot system, overly extreme as it may be, did successfully keep me engaged in the chase after better and better gear, all the way to the end. On top of all that, the game is drop-dead gorgeous. And I don't care the cars look like turd and the human models look like the bots those turds dropped out of, they disappear very easily within these surroundings. And even right at launch, it was beautifully optimized and virtually bug-free. It took me close to 20 hours to beat it and 100% it on my first playthrough on the normal difficulty, which I heartily recommend to any potential future players. The higher difficulty settings just turn every enemy into an irritating bullet sponge, and I believe it is infinitely more sensible to play an easy but ridiculously fun game than a challenging but tiring one. And now, to sneakily convert this video into a review of Doom Eternal and compare the two. Nah, just kidding. There isn't much I can say about Eternal. As I mentioned, I did enjoy it. And sure, the combat system might just be the most ingenious, groundbreaking first-person shooter combat system ever, but the game interrupts it way too much and too often with immensely unenjoyable platforming sections. So, as a whole package experience, Eternal is an 8 out of 10. Shadow Warrior 2 though, an easy 9. And still the best single-player first-person shooter I played in over a decade.
Well, would you look at you? You know what? I'm gonna upgrade you from worthless piece of shit to just plain old piece of shit.
Okay, now play the montage.
Bang, bang, bang! Fuckface! big arsenal you have. I made a joke about your grandma's arsenal.